Nobody wakes up in the morning, not even, again, Hitler or Putin or whoever you want to come up as an example. Nobody comes up in the morning, wakes up in the morning, goes to the mirror and does the Disney villain thing, like, whoa, what kind of evil can I do today? No, they think they're doing the right thing. I mean, Putin has justifications to himself and to the world for what he's doing, and so did Hitler, and so did Mussolini, etc., etc. The question, therefore, is, well, should we buy those justifications? So, like, I don't think of Hitler as a universalist or Putin as a universalist, and if they think of themselves that way, they just don't understand what universalism actually is. So, no, I think that if we take universalism or cosmopolitanism or however, whatever word you want to use, seriously, then it really does follow that certain actions are not acceptable, and I don't see how one could reasonably use them, use those ideas as in defense of those actions. The fact that people do anyway, because lots of people don't reason particularly well, or they don't pay particular attention to philosophy or facts on the ground, that's a fact of human life. But no, I cannot honestly imagine somebody who says, I'm a cosmopolitan, therefore I'm entitled to kill half of the world because they don't look like me. That's like, that you just don't understand. What?
But that's a very common cosmopolitan idea for Europe in a certain period of time.
No, it isn't.
It is.
Absolutely not.
For example. No, I mean, it actually is. I mean, my second book was on how Josiah Royce literally introduces the notion of cosmopolitanism and idealism on the basis of enslaving a whole group of people in the early 20th century. And he had this debate even at the University of Edinburgh in their philosophical society, like trying to figure out how Anglo-Saxonism could be extended over German idealism as a justification for why Anglo-Saxons should rule the world and bring in democracy.
Right, but what that is a very good example of rationalization.
Right, but you have centuries and centuries of, right, but this is what I mean. So like you're, in our time, we're saying that this doesn't fit with what we think the rationalization would be. But then from the 18th to 19th century, you have all the letters and the premier institutions of Europe that are centers of philosophy endorsing the very same argument. This is what I mean. It's a perspective of time. It's a perspective of how context and perspective shifts. It's socially undesirable for us to make that admission now, and what we say is that wasn't rational or philosophically rigorous. But even Nazism was thought to be a product of a certain idealist tradition. Houston Stewart Chamberlain actually defected from an Anglo-Saxon birth to support a Germanophile tradition precisely on the basis they thought idealism was a more active sentiment of the universal and the one in the society, that it could actually create a unified notion of a folk. So we have to be careful with suggesting that those are all mistakes when that's a progression of the kinds of ideas, these traditions in the plurality of the West that you think exist, but somehow don't become taken up as desirable.
Okay, but it seems to me that underlying a lot of this last few minutes is the fundamental question of, who says what and why. And that's an objection you can raise to anything, and if we take it too seriously, then we can just quit, go home, and not have a discussion, right? Because if you say, well, but who says that cosmopolitanism means this as opposed to that? Well, I say one thing, you say another thing, let's have a conversation here, and let's have that conversation based on evidence, reason, on actual definitions, on historical trends, etc., etc. And I think that if we have that conversation, it will turn out that thinking of Hitler or Putin as cosmopolitan or universalist is just mistaken. It's just not the right way to think about it, regardless of whether they themselves thought that way or not. But you can always argue the point, absolutely, sure.
I think there's a distinction. As an intellectual, I would love to have that conversation with you, right? Because I think it would be interesting, intellectual history. But I think there is something about the relationship that power has to the idea of the universal that's extended itself into the problem of eliminating other groups of people, which is what we're concerned with, right? So there is a debate about how different people agree or disagree about what good or bad is, okay? What's moral or what's immoral. But the question is, who has the power to actually make those things relevant in the real world such that they could eliminate whole groups of people? So the reality of the situation is that whether or not Hitler was suffering from a mistaken identity of being a universalist, is that he created a certain system of power and deployment of violence that certainly occupied a moment within human history that gave the illusion that this is a idea, an ideology or belief system that, if it would have won, right, would set the terms of what we think the metaphysical tradition between good and bad is. So we're working from the background of a human history where Nazism lost. But it is possible that Nazism
Like
could have
Zeus,
won.
yes.
Right, well, yes, but notice, and this is what I mean though, notice how the discourse on power and what we take as the historical epic fundamentally changes the calculus that we would have about what good and evil is.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.